So, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight for our next installment about our welfare project, a project that's very close to all of our hearts. I know we already had a very interesting webinar session for everyone with Professor Jane Williams, um, uh, really prior to our most recent General Assembly, where she presented after our General Assembly in Lisbon a deep dive into the very interesting project that she's been running at Hartpury University for us. And it's been a wonderful collaboration. We have got excellent news and that we have the green light to go ahead into the next phase of the project, which sort of highlights, I think, our long-term commitments for welfare. So this is very, very good news, and it's hopefully going to be a very inspiring session where Jane will take us through what has been achieved so far, and then also give us an outlook into the future here. And of course, your opportunities here as our highly valued Statbook members to give us your feedback, to give us your thoughts and your input, because this is a project for all of us to work together to drive welfare all over the world. So, thank you very much for everyone's time tonight. I'm going to briefly introduce who everybody is and also a couple of housekeeping rules. So, one is that can you please make sure that you are registered on this webinar with your full name and your stud book? This is so that in case there are any follow-up questions, the team can get back to you specifically and know how to get hold of you. So if you've raised, for example, a question that warrants further discussion or clarification or follow-up questions, etc. So if you could just make sure, I think if you click on the three dots on the side of your window, you should be able to edit your name. And if you could just put in brackets after your name, your stat book, that would be very, very helpful for our team. So thank you very much for that. So we have from our office here, Nadine Brandner and Morgan. So they're both here to support you in any of the administrative questions. This meeting is being recorded as well, so that we do keep a record and we can take the discussion forward from tonight then as well. And also from our board, I'm welcoming Andries van Dalen, our new Vice President in charge of finance. So this is, I think Andries, your first appearance in public in your new role as a Vice President for our organization. So welcome.
I
And
have photos available for fans.
and you will be signing them on request, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, of course.
And I think Katie is here as well. Hello, Katie. Katie, of course, is the co-author of our State of the Industry report, which also does a lot of coverage of welfare and has really developed that focus in recent years very strongly. So welcome, Katie, and thank you for joining us tonight. And then, of course, also our president, Jan Petersen, is here. So hello, Jan. Thank you that you're able to join us.
Course.
And so, yeah, so that's, I think, everybody welcomed, apart from, of course, last but not least, Jane Williams. Here she is, the woman of the hour. So, Jane, without further ado, I think I'll pass the baton over to you, and you are going to give us some exciting news, I'm sure.
Hopefully, you'll all agree it is very exciting. So bear with me. Thank you, Eva. I'm just going to try and share my PowerPoint.
Yes, yes.
Excellent. So good evening, everybody. As you know, I'm Professor Jane Williams from Hartpury University. And it's my pleasure to once again be coming before the World Breeding Federation of Sport Horse and their members to talk about where we've got up to with our exciting collaboration and project. So we have an exciting update to the work Hartpury has been doing in partnership with the World Breeding Federation to enhance sport horse welfare and breeding. I always it's useful to take a step back and to really think about why are we looking at welfare so much. So as we're all aware, how we interact with horses continues to be increasingly questioned by both the public and everyone involved and gets to see our industry. We're all responsible for physical and mental well-being of the horses in our care. And maybe that focus has been more on highly visible sports such as racing. We're starting to see it more within dressage, within some of the other Olympic disciplines as well. Key part of my research and the work that we've done together to date has been to support and work with the equestrian industry to be able to apply an evidence-informed approach to horse welfare and to think about how we can support people within the industry to generate evidence of what we do now, but also to think about how we move forward our practice to ensure we are providing horses with a good life. The World Breeding Federation remains really committed to that premise, and the work we've done to date has been very much about ensuring the welfare of horses involved in breeding, as well as those produced through breeding, by adhering to ethical, evidence-informed and responsible breeding practices, management and care. So this underpins where we're going with the next steps of this project. So as part of this commitment, back in 2023 now, Hartpury and the World Breeding Federation joined forces and we engaged in a joint research project focused on enhancing sport horse welfare in breeding. It was really exciting initial collaboration. I think we all worked really well together, and hopefully some of you have sat in on some of the prior webinars and also maybe attended the General Assembly where we presented the results. But this first stage was very much about setting the scene and understanding where we were at that point in time. So it involved, first of all, interviewing members of the World Breeding Federation and key stakeholders working within equine welfare and breeding. These interviews were analysed and generated 3 core themes: selection of breeding stock, the mare and the stallion and the management of these, foal and young horse management as a third one. And then themes and underlying items which sat underneath them informed a series of systematic reviews whereby the research team went into the published literature, also industry guidelines, and looked to see what evidence already existed, what were the gaps in that evidence, and where maybe we could learn some lessons and think about generating that into recommendations. At that point, we went to some specific focus groups as stage 3. So they were reviewed in focus groups which comprised industry experts from the breeding sector, but also from the welfare sector and also some researchers. And they refined the summary of the outcomes from them interviews and systematic reviews into a document and some recommendations which we could utilise. So across all 3 management areas that were reviewed, we found consideration of horse welfare was limited. The focus was very much around health rather than welfare, and that probably is reflective of where the industry was and how we're maybe focused towards on welfare perspective. It's quite normal in prior research that we would have looked at health-related outcomes. So how do we keep our horses healthy, performing, or being able to be capable of breeding, rather than maybe considering that more complete picture. We also found in research, particularly, welfare needs was very much omitted in research study designs. Published papers tended to focus on the execution or the efficacy of specific techniques and practices, or on health and disease outcomes, rather than applying this more holistic approach where we evaluate how the welfare of horses are impacted by what we do with them, the practices they engage with, or focusing on how we can provide the horses and all elements of the breeding industry with a good life. So we were thinking about how we could take that forward in terms of the initial study. And we found, particularly in the industry welfare guidelines, best practice within a broader welfare context was maybe embedded, but was not explicit. And we thought there was scope maybe to think about how we could increase that detail or describe options to be able to implement these. So we have a good starting point for how we manage physical health of horses. We have some spot on psychological or mental well-being, but we maybe are not up to date in terms of how we integrate that within our management and our research studies to think about how the horse is feeling within all of that. There's also a degree of assumptions, and we need to be really careful about avoiding assumptions. We easily say something is well managed, but quite often the evidence to really reassure us that this is the case or to evidence what's happening is maybe not there, or comes back to that physical rather than mental well-being perspective. So what that we produced as the outcome of the study we came up with these 6 core values: to respect horses, to provide horses with a good life, prioritise horse welfare, to be solution driven, to be trustworthy through transparency and accountability, and committed to evolve. You can see they all relate to where the equine industry is going, with the premise of social license, but also to enable all of us who work with horses in different contexts to be responsible for how we manage them horses, and to hopefully give them the best possible life that we can within the context of how we're managing them. So we produced also, alongside the value, a core welfare definition that we recommended to the Federation, and that was to ensure the welfare of horses and breeding, as well as the reduced breeding, is protected by adhering to ethical, evidence-informed and responsible breeding practices, management and care that ultimately provides horses with a good life. So, as well as the core values that we've just touched on, we're thinking about how we can translate this to an overall positive welfare experience. How can we support the sector, both within breeding and wider, the social license to operate, and be able to generate evidence to showcase to the public how we are meeting that care to our horses? And we're committed to evolve, because like anything, more and more we find out, the more information we get, things change and evolve, and we need to be able to be in that place. The study also generated 10 welfare principles. I appreciate it's a very busy screen, but in essence, the 10 welfare principles are numbered around the outside of the values. So the results and the feedback from the members who took part in the study identified that key evidence to understand current practices combined with greater connection between the breeding and competitive stages of the sport horses is needed. So if you think about these guidelines, these are the starting point. These are things that people can look at, think about how they can apply it in their own practice. But we wanted in the next stage to take a bit of a deeper dive. So we've got our current practice reviewed. Through the webinar that we undertook, through some of the industry engagement that has taken place, this concept of increased connection, that we shouldn't just look at breeding in isolation, and we shouldn't just look at competitive disciplines in isolation. Actually, we're breeding for horses to take part in the sport horse disciplines, and actually the two are really interconnected. So we need to consider that connection and how we think about that from a welfare perspective, but also across the lifetime of the horse a little more. Alongside this, the peer feedback we received was very clear that educational support was required to inform practice, and that could generate a sustainable approach to sport horse management that was working towards prioritising providing the horses with a good life across the whole of their lifespan, not just looking at breeding, as I said, in isolation, or competitive pursuits in isolation, or retirement after that. So another key area within this, and which came through in the discussion of the results, was ensuring that we don't do this ourselves in isolation. So very much the steer was that we listen to everybody involved in the industry, because there's a whole wealth of experience and knowledge, but also different cultures and circumstances and historic practice, which is underpinning where we are now and what we do. And to be able to bring the industry with us, we need to understand all of them different perspectives and be able to pull everybody together to look at this holistic approach and be able to take it forward. Today, as part of the World Breeding Federation's for Sport Horses ongoing commitment to enhancing sport welfare, I'm incredibly excited to be with you to announce the next stage of the partnership. And we are looking to recruit a 4-year PhD student and to have an extended project which is entitled Enhancing Traceability, Transparency and Equine Welfare in Sport Horse Breeding. And our focus is going to be on assisted reproductive techniques. The reason we selected assisted reproductive techniques is it was one of the key areas where welfare maybe wasn't as clear and evident through the research. It was very much about the practice and the efficacy when we looked at research papers. But it's also an area which we are aware through our feedback, there's a lot of debate and a lot of discussion across the industry and beyond, and how these areas influence the market, how they influence the horses part of it, and how we maybe manage them long term as well. So it's really exciting to think about how we can bring these 3 areas together. So this is very much a project which I'll talk you through the stages of in a second, but it's very much designed to apply a holistic approach to how we evaluate horse welfare during assisted reproductive technologies, and to look at that through a range of the different technologies and techniques which are available. So approaches to ARTs, their application, their management, their regulation vary across breeds, in different countries and across different members of the World Breeding Federation. As I said, they were identified through the systematic review and in consultation with industry stakeholders as an area where existing traceability, transparency and welfare implications had scope to be better understood and potentially improved. And I think taking this holistic approach to think about how we can pull them three concepts together to understand what people are doing more currently, to understand how horse welfare is managed within that, how we can maybe articulate what we do, why we do it, and what evidence we collect to be able to ascertain horse welfare and be able to communicate that effectively to a broader public is a key goal of this project. So we will apply this holistic approach, working again with both Federation and industry stakeholders to try and understand existing practices across the equine breeding sector from an individual breeder level through to a stud book, up to maybe federations, and thinking about how that is impacting onto the next stages of horses' careers as they go forward as well. We want to be able to profile current practice to understand cultural differences and what influences are in play to guide how ART is used globally and to evaluate their implications to the horse. The outcome of this, hopefully, will be increased knowledge and understanding, but also will aim to be able to inform some good practice guidance and to support future continuing professional development and education initiatives in this field as well. So this is our planned PhD programme. So a PhD is a programme of academic research. It's at level 8, which is the highest level that we tend to do qualifications at in education. And it normally focuses around one overarching aim, and it's split into a number of studies that interlink together to give you an outcome to that initial question or the aim that you set out to achieve. So we're proposing 4 studies in this next stage of collaboration. Study 1 will survey World Breeding Federation members and breeding staff across all levels of the industry to catalogue the scale and the scope of global use of assisted reproductive technologies across different horse breeds, and the aim is to identify existing measures which are used and to evaluate how horse welfare is managed within these. And we recognise there's a wealth of different experience and different levels and numbers and experience within this sector. So the idea is to go to that global population and to bring that information together. The second study will then aim to undertake some semi-structured interviews within some breeding sector representatives, looking at breeders of books, individuals within that. And this is to enable us to understand the management of traceability of records related to assisted reproductive technology use. We want to think about how that relates to registration of horses and how that's managed on a local, national and global level, and to evaluate the cultural, practical and management differences which might underpin how that practice is managed in different places, in different countries. I think sometimes it's very easy to just think of this from a very Western European perspective, and actually this is a whole global sector, and we want to make sure that all of them voices are represented and we understand what that global perspective looks like. Study 3 is going to utilise existing data, and we're going to try and come up with a plan to get a consensus or agreement for what is considered best practice. So the aim of this project is to generate these practice guidelines and to be able to provide the right information to underpin them and to get a holistic measure of horse welfare within assisted reproductive technology use. We will utilise recognised experts across the sector, and we will use the data we've gathered to come up with statements, maybe some outline of particular practices, and we will do something called a Delphi study, which effectively brings them experts together, does a number of different layers of discussion so that the experts put their input into that, and they come up with what is recognised as the best practice. So it isn't us as the researchers saying, you should do this. It's you guys using your experience and your knowledge to come up with the best way to be able to manage these horses within breeding and to maximise their welfare. And the idea from that is to think about how we generate a risk calculator, which is C4. So it's really nice to be able to have these best practice guidelines, but we want to know maybe a way that people can evaluate their own individual practice and to think about what they're doing and where do they measure potentially in this holistic perspective of how we're managing horse welfare in this area. So the risk calculator will take the data that we've collected, it will take them best practice guidelines, it will take the consensus from the members, and ideally through the analysis we'll end up with a scoring system whereby in a lovely ideal world we'd end up with something you could plug in your data as an individual breeder or as a stud, and we could then give you a rating which links to the risk for that holistic measure of horse welfare. And then we can utilise that information alongside the risk calculator to inform both education. And the reason I've got some little rosettes on the far side of the screen is to think about maybe we could give people some form of accreditation, all to be open for debate and discussion, but we could almost have like a bronze, silver and gold level of welfare, which sits underneath this as well. So the idea is all this work will come together to lead to both best practice guides, CPD for the sector, and ideally some form of gold, silver, bronze rating for members to engage with and to have maybe a public facing opportunity to showcase how they are managing welfare and their commitment to welfare. So this was our timeline. We were originally going to tell you about this at the General Assembly and it didn't quite work out, but you can see from where we are on the roadmap that we've actually gone through a number of the stages to doing this. So we put advert, we've had applications, we got a really strong cohort of candidates who applied, and we shortlisted 4 candidates. And it was really important for us when we were looking at who was the best fit for this project going forward, that we also ensured that them candidates had the opportunity to chat with representatives of the World Breeding Federation, because I think it's really key that we wanted a candidate who has good communication skills, who understands the breeding sector, maybe hasn't got too much of an in-depth embedded sector, because we don't want their biases to come into shape where they're going with the research project. But we definitely wanted someone who had that great communication ability, someone who could build relationships, who had experience in the types of research methods, the qualitative and the analytical skills which are going to be needed to be able to undertake this project as well. So both us at Hartpury, we had a panel interview which the academics interviewed the people. World Breeding Federation representatives also did an informal chat with them so we could see what their background was. And we are now very excited to be able to tell you that we've appointed a candidate. And we've appointed a previous Hartpury student called Molly Macbeth, who's going to be your representative for this PhD project. I'll reiterate that the final cohort of exceptional candidates, we could have appointed any of them to be a really good representative for this project. And I'm really excited that we're having wider conversations with the guys who didn't quite get there, to think about how maybe they can be involved or how they could do some complementary projects alongside this as well. But I'm hoping you'll already like Molly. She is actually one of my previous undergraduate and master's students. She is very, very intelligent, very personable, and will be an excellent ambassador, I believe, for this project. So we now need you guys to help us to get the project started, to start thinking about where we're going with it. So Molly will be officially enrolled in January, just after Christmas. And the idea is she's got a 4-year programme of work to start to undertake, and it will be quite quick off marks. So while we're really excited that the project is going to get started really soon in the new year, we're also going to be coming back to you guys and say, we need your help. Can you please let us know if you're willing to be part of the data collection, if you can point us to individuals we should speak to. We can't do this project without you and your experience, and we hope that we'll really be able to engage with you, get to understand what you're doing in a lot more detail, And hopefully all together we'll come up with something which is really, really exciting and useful at the end of the project as well. So that is me done. As always, if you've got any particular questions, I'll happily take them now, or any feedback or comments. But also, if you want to draw a line, the email address is on the screen. Feel free to get in touch. So I'm going to stop sharing and come back into the room.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. As always, you've managed to pack a lot in into, yeah, a very short space. And I think it looks really exciting. In particular, I think where we have seen a lot of evolution from our earlier conversations is this idea about impact, practical impact and practical measures and I think that's interesting. So what came back, I'll remind everybody in our previous webinar was a desire by our stud books to also take into account their very different situations all over the world. And welfare measures that, might work for us in Europe might be very different in overseas countries simply because the challenges there are very different. And so I think you've built in this flexibility there with this scoring system that you're proposing, which I think will provide for that and will give people a flexible approach that can make welfare work for them. So thank you for that, Jane. It's really good, and this is a good example where I think our conversations here in the webinars are really important because they give us really good feedback and hints about where we need to go in our thinking. And of course, one of the things that we've become known for as an organization is this science and fact-driven approach, data-driven approaches for us is very important that we don't, there's a lot of prejudice in our industry and a lot of, oh, we've always done it like this. And I think my horse is happy and all of these things. So it's very nice, Jane, that you are also, nudging us a little bit in that and push us out, maybe out of our comfort zones at times. So I find this has been a really, really good relationship so far, and it's lovely to see how it continues to develop. Now I'm going to open the space for our Startbook members who've joined us from all over the world to give us their questions or feedback. And also, what are your ideas about how you would like to be involved and how you would like to take this forward?
I was wondering what sort of updates we'll get along the way. So, what are the plans for, the information we can give out to the public?
It's a really good question. And I think, again, that is probably something we can agree in principle as to how you would like that to look up. When we discussed having the PhD studentship and having this slightly extended relationship, a key part of that was being able to update the members and to demonstrate and show progress as we went through. So our students have to do an annual progress review to get the rubber stamp to say they're still on track and they're progressing towards the PhD. But for me, the General Assembly provides a really good opportunity whereby we can engage and we can showcase and demonstrate the progress. But we can also build in other opportunities. I've chatted with Molly and she would be happy to do sort of little webinars, and we can do a double act and we can bring and keep people up to date with where we are. So I think logically, as we have 4 studies, presenting where we get to at the end of each study is a logical output, isn't it, that we can bring back to the members. But I also think we can have touch points, and we'd be quite happy to be able to do that as well and to be able to feed that through. The aim is also to look at how we disseminate that information broader, because for me, another key element of this whole relationship is placing the World Breeding Federation as a leader within this space, because what we're talking about, while it's focused in breeding, has parallels to all different elements of the equestrian sector and where we're going. And actually, we need organisations who are brave enough to stand up and to really put themselves at the forefront of this and to lead them conversations. So I think how we can work together to disseminate that broader is also something we should consider as we go through this.
Maybe I have a question, Eva.
Mm-hmm.
Jane, what do you need from the stud books?
So we've got an outline for the project. What we're probably going to, I'm going to dodge it slightly. I'll say we will come to you with more explicit requirements as we go through planning the studies in more depth. But in essence, I think for that initial study, we're going to need to know some contacts and people who we can go to be able to ask them what they're doing, how they're keeping records, and also from a stud book level, are you registering the amount of horses who are coming through from the different techniques? How are you doing that? Have you got thresholds, minimum and maximum? How are you managing that? So it's probably more the right people to have them conversations with, and then hopefully maybe mining some of the data which is already in existence.
Clear. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jane. If you come up with a little list of requirements for us, we can then disseminate. That might be helpful. And I think you're
definitely.
right. And it's not always, sometimes you just need the person at the stud book who does the actual registering and who's got oversight of the database. And yeah.
I was just going to come in and say, well done, Jane, and congratulations on appointing Molly. I'd say it's nice to get to that stage. But just to kind of reiterate what Andrea said, more than happy to help you with data or any questions should you have them.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. And I think for me, this couldn't happen without the relationship that we've had up to now, and the success of the project is going to really hinge on that dual approach. So yeah, the more people who are willing to take part, the better, and that's definitely good news from my perspective. To add to that, probably is also if you feel there's anything we've missed, we can't make the project so big it becomes untenable within the time frame and loses the focus. But one of the things with research is that it never goes quite on the smooth trajectory that you put in place. It tweaks along the way and slightly shifts. So there's a really key opportunity here. If somebody thinks we've missed something glaringly obvious in this picture, please do feed it back, and we can then consider how we could build that in, or if we have made an omission.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And
Yes.
and again,
Could I put a question? Egan from Denmark.
Hello.
Hello. I think transparency and also information along the way is very important, because when the PhD is finished and we have the 10 guidelines, there are breeders who has to follow them. And how can we get the breeder to follow them at that time? It might be some kind of consideration along the way so that the Peter say, this is a study we want to hear about more about, we want to learn about it. So when the 10 guidelines are there, that we also want to follow them. Is there some thoughts about that?
Yep.
Oh,
No, I couldn't agree more. But Eva, do you want to take it, or do you want me to go?
I just wanted to briefly say what I think what Egon is saying really correctly is that at the moment we've been talking about how we talk to our stud book members and how we as stud books engage. But I think what Egon is pointing out absolutely rightly is we need to talk to the breeders, don't we? And that communication to the breeders needs to happen earlier rather than right at the end of the PhD. So I think that's a very good point. Jane.
Yeah, no, and I can hopefully reassure you that a key element of this framework of research is to do that all the way through, because it's something which has come through from the feedback, and a lot of this is around impact and either supporting or generating some change and bringing to the surface the great practice which already exists. And we can only do that by engaging with everybody at all levels. So definitely in my plans is to speak to individual breeders, and that will be to understand how they work within these frameworks and what they're doing. But also within that, we can ask and consider, how can we get the information to you? The translation of research into practice is absolutely critical. And we need to understand the people who are the end user to understand what works, because I can sit here and come up with all these fancy ways to do it, and it might not engage people at all. So I think that's a really key element, which is embedded within the actual programme of work. The other side is, again, making that link between breeding and the broader sport horse industry. So I also envisage we will go and we will speak to people who have the end product, if you like, who are getting these horses, who are going off and competing them and thinking about what's the implications to them of what's happening in breeding, and almost closing that loop to get the holistic, broad spectrum industry overview, and to see how we marry all of that together. It sounds easy when I say it. It's not going to be, but we will definitely think about how we can pull all of that voices together.
Oh, thank you very much, Jane. And here's also another message of support from Bérangère. She says, that she's happy to be part of the next step and build something useful for us World Breeding Federation members for the future. So, again, a lot of positive signals here from the stud books, but we mustn't forget about the breeders. I think that's a really, really strong message. I'm wondering whether these webinars that we might be organizing might be something we could open up to our breeders. We've had some really good success with welfare-focused webinars for breeders in the past, with participants from all over the world. It's always been really exciting. You end up with people from Australia and goodness everywhere, So, so that's definitely something that needs to be in our plan, in our development and rollout plan for this. So thank you, Jane. In fact, Nadine, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to say the reason this particular webinar is members only is because it was obviously directed at our members during the General Assembly, and in lieu of the technical difficulties, we had to do it like this today. But your suggestion of doing other webinars in connection with this project open to the general breeding public and our breeders is a very good idea, because it gets them involved in the conversation as well. And they're obviously the people that we want to get in touch with.
And to add on to that, one of the other projects I've been involved with Hartpury, linked to the thoroughbred sector and looking at how we improve traceability within thoroughbreds coming out of racing into second careers. And one of the strategies that worked really well within that project was to come up with a communication and marketing plan, which sat alongside the actual research project. So my aim is to sit down with Molly and to think about how we can do that, but also to engage with the Federation and go, okay, can we think of almost a simultaneous attack in terms of how we build that momentum up and the engagement? So within the Thoroughbred Census project, we actually saw a huge amount of positive feedback just by having some of that engagement with people. And there was an awful lot of knowledge gained and really positive impact for what was already happening well within some of them communities by doing that. And I think, again, this is a key opportunity to engage in that type of approach as well.
Fantastic. Now we have a really good message here also from Kathy from Canada, who informs us that in Canada they have the Canadian Council for Animal Care, of which she is in fact a member, which oversees welfare, in her country. And it might be really helpful to draw on the knowledge and expertise of our members in the different countries to see how we can engage with the relevant bodies there, because that will really help the effective rollout of this if we can draw on these sort of links that people have, So thank you very much for that, Kathy. That's really useful information for us and can really help us get traction, I think, in Canada for this project.
No, definitely. And if we could repeat that sort of initiative across different countries, because again, we know a lot of stuff, but we don't know the ins and outs of how everything is managed in different places. So the more people who are on the ground and engaged and embedded in that can help and support us and point us in the right direction, the better.
Yes, and I think the strong message here is to you, to our stud books. We need you. You're the people with the local knowledge and the understanding, and you'll be key in making this project a success and in helping us shape it. Right, well, thank you so much. Are there any more questions, or is everybody just wanting to go and digest what they've heard tonight? No, I think it's all quiet on the floor now. I think one thing that I personally can't wait is actually to meet Molly. We're really looking forward to welcoming her. And of course, hopefully my department, the marketing and communications department, will be able to work with her on the communication strategy as well. And then I think we'll look forward to maybe organizing a webinar in the not too distant future once Molly found her feet and, and has had her initial starts. And then, of course, our next General Assembly is going to be in Dublin. Sonia, we're looking forward to that. And that's not too far either. So maybe it'll be possible for Molly to come and join us there, Jane.
Dublin's an amazing place. I'm sure we can do a little field trip over there. I used to work there for a couple of years, so yeah, old stomping ground. It'd be nice to return.
Fantastic. Well, and I mean, warm thank you from all of us here at the World Reading Federation, to you, Jane. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you. You've always been such a positive force with such good energy and a way of, being able to take feedback and help us develop this project. It's been a real delight working with you. And
Can I say something?
yeah.
Yeah, it will help to get all these stud books involved, to have a kind of a list or something like that, a short memo. What do you need? What do you want from the stud books? That will help, because we just have a handful of stud books here, and we have many more stud books. And I think it will help to have that list and tell the stud book, this is what we need. It's important. They know it will be important. So I think that might be a good idea.
Yeah,
No,
completely.
definitely. And if so we'll need to get some ethical approval in place once Molly starts in February, but sort of, I don't know, around February, March time, we'll definitely be coming to you with a list of stuff that we would like to find out from you and be able to see if we've missed some elements. So yeah, please watch this space, but it might take a little bit of time to hit some of the criteria that we have to have in place for the research side of things to get us there.
For instance, in the Netherlands, we just introduced a guideline. I don't know, how do we call it in English? Guideline with good practices for on welfare on horses, and that could help as well. I don't know. Maybe you don't need it, but I think it could help. So
No, definitely. I mean, all of that information we can
ChatGPT
get
is
in
my friend,
understand.
so I can translate it, and you get it in English.
That would
That'd be
helpful.
amazing.
Yeah, I think this fact finding in terms of what already exists out there is part of Jane, the plan you're proposing. So I think that could be a really big part in that initial communique to all our members, is to
Definitely.
give space there where people can give us a feedback and an idea of what they're already doing, so that we can, yeah, certainly not duplicate work either, I think, but also learn from the different landscapes out there. So yeah, thank you. Are there any other things? So I think our next steps are then, Jane, we're waiting for Molly to get her feet under the table and for you to do all the things you need to do with getting the research started, and then we're looking forward to hearing from you around March time with a list
I
of,
think maybe in the interim, if we can work together, get a nice bit of press out
yeah.
there and just really showcase that this is something which you guys are investing in and committed to, and we should share that with the broader sector, because I think it is a really positive move from the World Breeding Federation.
Absolutely. And if we want to connect with the sport also, then we need the wider equestrian community to be aware of what we're doing. I fully agree. And then I think you'll be hearing from us as the stud books, fairly soon, with further updates. So, and in the meantime, I think, Jane, you've kindly left your email address for everybody on the screen. So if anybody wants to send Jane anything yourselves because you have further follow-up questions or feedback or anything like that, you go ahead. Sorry, Jane. You might get a busy
honestly,
inbox.
please do get in touch. And give me a prod if it doesn't get through, because sometimes they get snarled up in firewalls and stuff. So yeah, please do.
Oh, brilliant. In fact, I think Nadine and Morgan have just put it in the chat as well. So you've got that email address as well again there. And of course, we'll continue to be in direct conversation, Jane, and we'll watch this space for future rollout of communications from us to you and to the wider equestrian community. So, well, thank you very, very much, everybody. I think it was short and productive. Nadine, have I forgotten anything?
No, I think you've summed everything up very nicely, and I think it's great that we finally had an opportunity to do this. It's a shame we didn't get to do it in South Africa, but we do now know at least that we've got Molly on board, which we didn't know in South Africa.
Yes.
So maybe it was well worth waiting to do this session now. And I think we're ready to start the new year, yeah, with a lot of dedication and enthusiasm.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for everyone who's made the time to be here tonight, or slash whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. And yeah, this session will be recorded, so if anybody wants to go back over looking at some of the slides, etc., that's all possible, because we do have a recording of the webinar. So thank you so much. Thank you very much, Jane, for your time. And thank you also to my fellow board members and to the World Being Federation office, Nadine, and to Morgan. Okay, goodbye, everyone.